I'm speaking to Sara Amaral from Portugal. Nice to meet you. Would you please introduce yourself, Sara?
Sure. So my name is Sara. I'm the Secretary General of the Portuguese National Youth Council. And we are based in Portugal for sure, but everyone is working remotely at this moment due to the COVID situation. But I'll start by introducing a bit myself in terms of how I got into the youth work field. So basically I did a traineeship at one of the arms, so to say, of the Council of Europe, namely at the North-South Center of the Council of Europe, which is based in Lisbon. And I was a youth cooperation trainee. So basically from there, we did a lot of training of trainers with non-formal education methodologies and so on. And in one of the activities, I got to know the Portuguese National Youth Council. And then when my traineeship finished, I started working for the National Youth Council as an international policy officer. So I stayed there for 2.5 years. Then I moved on to the Ibero-American Youth Organization, again, working in the youth field. Then I decided to move to Australia, and I worked for the state government, supporting young people in their transition to employment, mostly refugees, asylum seekers, and young people in general who had barriers to employment. Then I decided to move back to Portugal and started working as Secretary General this time at the National Youth Council. And so the big first activity in this role was the World Conference of Ministers responsible for youth and the Youth Forum Lisbon Plus 21, which was held last year, gathering more than 100 ministers from all over the world in discussing youth policies, and youth work was for sure one of the topics. Mm-hmm. And that's basically a bit about myself and how I got into this field.
Thank you. Can you tell us which success and strength in youth work could your country contribute to the European debate and practice?
Sure. So we actually did some advancements in the last years, where we have adopted a role as a youth worker. So before there was legally not the role of a youth worker, and now we do have one in the list of professions, I mean. So this was a big advancement for us, and we are still working on the core competencies and so on of the youth worker. But then again, I believe one of our strengths is also the implementation of activities and using non-formal education methodologies, and how we work with municipalities on also influencing them somehow in also incorporating these methodologies into their daily work. And we as the National Youth Council have also been working very closely with them in terms of building local youth plans and having youth strategies in terms of the municipalities as a guiding principle for their work. And this close cooperation has enabled also for a bit more quality on the youth work at the local level, and also the recognition of the role that the youth worker has.
Mm-hmm. And what are the main challenges of youth work in Portugal? Perhaps the 3 main challenges, can you tell us?
Okay. So one of the challenges that we were actually discussing an hour ago in our national delegation group was that the training offered to youth workers doesn't always have the quality standards that we would hope for. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the challenges, I would say. The other one is bridging the gap between the formal education sector and the non-formal, and how we can further develop the skills of young people in this context. And I suppose also the recognition of the skills that young people gather from participating in activities. So the soft skills that employers usually look for, how can we make it more strongly evident that they possess these skills, and how they acquired those skills. So I would say these are mainly the three challenges.
And where do you see the greatest need for further development of youth work in your country? Perhaps with regard to the aims of the youth work agenda, the 8 aims?
Mm-hmm. So I think maybe there's a link between the various institutions that somehow they practice youth work, but they don't know that they do it somehow, and how we can actually intertwine all these government agencies and ministries that work with youth. How can we streamline the youth work agenda in their daily practices? So we were just discussing, for instance, the youth guarantees coming out next year, and how can we actually create a pathway for young people to get training under the youth guarantee scheme on becoming a youth worker. So this would be like a way of intertwining these different ministries and actually presenting to the young person that they can actually be a youth worker. Because we were discussing too that most of us land in these youth work fields a bit by accident somehow. And how can we actually streamline this as a career pathway?
And do you think of professional youth workers or volunteers?
In this context, I would say professional youth workers as a career, so to say, working in municipalities or inclusion projects, you name it. So there is a wide range of possibilities, and most of the times young people don't even consider it as a profession to pursue.
What kind of support could you get from Europe or in Europe to strengthen your youth work?
Yeah, so I believe these exchanges of good practices are very valuable. For instance, I was hearing yesterday that in Germany, I believe there is a youth scheme somehow, where you have an interministerial coordination body that ensures that in every law that is being adopted, youth check, yes, that's it, yeah, that there is a youth work or a youth perspective into it, and how can we actually ensure that the language is also youth friendly and so on. And that's something that I thought it was very interesting, and maybe, who knows, maybe we can push for it at the national level and learn from the German practice how it's working, and how we can actually also adopt and adapt to the Portuguese level. So I think these exchanges of good practices are very valuable.
And finally, what are your expectations towards the so-called Bonn process implementing the European Youth Agenda?
Yes, so actually we are very excited in how we can translate the Bonn process at the national and local levels. And we have came up with a lot of good ideas on how we can actually move forward by creating a petit comité, which actually will monitor the progress and actually tries to implement some of the agreements at the national level. For instance, one of the issues we were discussing is Portugal will review its national youth plan, and how we can actually incorporate the outcomes of the Bonn process into our national youth plan. So we came up with some ideas at the advocacy level, but also how we can bring innovation into the field. And so we were discussing how we can actually move forward and not having this as a solo event, but also something that has impact at the national and local levels.
So I wish you good luck and success for that, and thank you for
your
time. And well, we are curious what the final paper will bring.
Yes, me too.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.